Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video, and this is a bit of a video response, kind of. And before I actually do it, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, my hair is really short in this video, and the next video it's longer. That's because I filmed the other video and was preparing to post that one next, but then this subject came up, and I thought, I want to get this while it's still relatively fresh. This is a video response kind of to Mark, Lactobacillus Prime, who about a week ago or so posted a video that in itself was another video response to Nintendo Arcade, a fellow I don't normally follow, but it was an interesting question, and I thought, I really want to answer this one, so I'm doing this a little out of sequence. Also, on the subject of kind of community things, questions, and video responses, wanted to also do yet another little shout out for Swifto. Full title is Sane's Swifto Cilios. Alan Stewart did it on his Friday Waffle, and I noticed there was a little bit of a bump in the subscriber numbers for Swifto. He's an awesome guy. He actually just cut together a little trailer for my channel, which is now, if you visit my channel for the first time, it sort of shows this little video tribute, for lack of a better description. So I wanted to, once again, I'm going to put Swifto's main channel down below, and I highly recommend people check him out. He's awesome. And I want him to get more subscribers, just like Alan did, so. Anyway, let's get on with this video. So, Mark Lactobacillus posted a video, what would be the 10 arcade machines he would own, which Nintendo Arcade had posted, as I say, about a month ago. Now, Nintendo Arcade is coming from kind of this, he lives in the UK, he's got actual cabinets, actual hardware in his home, and that's bit of a dicey proposition for anybody. These are big machines, they take up space, so Nintendo Arcade was kind of talking about, okay, if you want to get into this hobby, if you want to collect arcade machines, what are the ones that I would recommend you get? And he gave a really good example of Battlezone. Sounds great on paper because it's a cool machine with the thing and you look through the little periscope, but it's actually not that great of a game, and he eventually gave his up. And so, what I would like to do is a video response to kind of Nintendo Arcade, kind of Lactobacillus. I'd like to list 10 machines that I wish I had and would own in an ideal situation where I've got this mansion with a giant, garage downstairs where I can actually put 10 machines of any size. And I'm kind of going to go from fairly normal things I would like to own to the ridiculous. But one interesting point, my favorite arcade game of all time is not even on this list. So this is not my favorite games. This is 10 machines I wish I would own, or I would own if I had the space, if money wasn't an object, etc. And they get a little ridiculous. Alright, now, it's worth noting as well, I posted my video about Vol, who's right over there, my main machine that allows me to play the classics that I really enjoy, like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and Space Invaders. Anything that's like standard button and joystick layout, I wouldn't want to own those cabinets because I've already got that with Vol, so I don't really need that kind of a, there's a lot of really well-known titles. Asteroids would almost make the cut because I love the Vector monitor, but there is the Vec Flash or Vec Fever cartridge, which you can put in the Vectrex, which plays Asteroids. I don't have one yet, nor am I necessarily going to get it. But there are games that are possible already. I would have said, oh yeah, I would totally love that cabinet. But because I can play a lot of them in a different format, why would I get the cabinet for it? I'm going to separate my list out here to 10 machines that I can't replicate with MAME or on the Vectrex or in any other form. One that I almost thought of saying, yes, I definitely want is Red Baron, but I've got that for the PlayStation 4 on the Atari Collection, and I have found a way to map the controls so that it actually replicates the analog throttle or joystick control of Red Baron in a way that is pretty close to the original experience. So again, these are not necessarily my favorite arcade machines. These are games that I can't replicate any other way. So let's get on with the list. The first one is Atari Video Pinball. This is not a great game by any stretch, but it's one that I played back in the day, and it looks really cool. It's this, much like when I talked about Warrior for the Vectrex, I talked about a limitation of replicating some of those machines is you've got a back glass that's reflecting with a mirror to show what's happening with the video game on a little physical diorama. And video pinball is one of those. It's got a little pinball machine made out of little cardboard bits and pieces and stuff. And then with the back glass reflected on it, you move this digital pinball around. And I think it's got flippers on the sides, can't remember. But I just thought that's one of those games that I remember playing back in the late 70s, early 80s that I really enjoyed. It's not a stellar game, but there's no way to really replicate that experience of it being a digital video pinball machine overlaid over a real physical with depth and bumpers and things a pinball layout. I have played that on MAME and it's really kind of dull in comparison. You need something where you can kind of look around and see this physical representation of the pinball machine and then have that overlay of the pinball game on top of it. So Video Pinball by Atari would actually be one of the 10 machines I would like to get. The next one actually kind of surprised me, and it's Marble Madness. I played this originally in the arcades, and it's a very cool trackball game that is hard to replicate in MAME. I've got it on Vol with that little trackball Logitech mouse. It doesn't sample fast enough. It doesn't feel like the trackball on the original machine. The very first time I went to the Seattle Pinball Show, I actually played a real Marble Madness machine, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot how good this is with a real trackball that's actually cycling properly and moving your little weird guy on the maze the right speed. And forget trying to play it with like a D-pad like on the NES or any of that stuff. No. It has to be a trackball, and MAME doesn't do it right, and I've never really, except for the actual physical hardware, I've never really found a Marble Madness recreation that is correct. So, even though I'm not a huge fan of Marble Madness, that would be a machine I would get. Now here's another machine I would definitely get, and I love it, and I'm scared to death of it. Sinistar. I've actually done a video where I tried out Sinistar on Vol, and he still scares me. The thing with Sinistar is the joystick on that was not just 8 directions, or 16 if you include the corners, it was actually 49 positions, which sounds crazy, but basically what it is where the center is where the joystick is in the center, imagine like 8 blocks around that for your different directions, then imagine another 8 blocks around that, or whatever the number would be, 16 I guess. Anyway, it works out to a grid of like 7 positions by 7 positions. It's a 49-way joystick. So the more you pull in each direction, the faster your little ship moves around. So again, I did do a video how the GameCube one in the Midway Arcade Treasures, using the analog stick of the GameCube controller is pretty close to what that big 49-way joystick is like. But I really love Sinistar. I've got a lot of fondness and fear of that guy, and that would definitely be one of the machines I would want to own. Something MAME doesn't do very well, and I have yet to find an alternative that works properly, are driving games. You can get steering wheels for your PlayStation, for sure. And I've got the Nijicon, which is awesome. And there are a few, because I've got the way to hook up the Nijicon to the original Xbox, I can play some of those driving games of yesteryear that are quite enjoyable, like race driving, hard driving, whatever. But a game that is almost impossible to find, because it never really was a home port, except for through MAME, which doesn't do it properly, is Night Driver. This is an old 70s game that really, the steering in it was very good, but in addition to the steering, you had to use the gears properly. And I really remember it. It's ages since I played it. I remember it being quite a challenge to I hadn't learned how to drive a car yet, but to move this was fine, and to change gears and not hit the little spokes on the sides, the little guardrails, was impossible. And I think it was ported once to one of the 80s computers, I can't remember right now, but other than that, there was never really a proper home port made of Night Driver. And again, on MAME, it just doesn't work right. You need a steering wheel with a gear shift. So that's definitely a machine that I would want to own because it's one of those great 70s titles. Also on the subject of 70s driving games, and I hope Steve Benway's watching because he would get a smile out of this, Speed Freak from Cinematronics in 1977. A vector driving game, kind of like Night Driver. Different kind of environment, and you've got like cows on the sides, and it's very realistic driving steering mechanics. Loved Speed Freak. I think I played it once. I can't remember where. I think it was in the UK actually. Maybe Blackpool? Way back in I think 1981. We were in Blackpool. I think they may have had a Speed Freak there, and I remember thinking, this is really cool. An asteroids driving game. Yeah, I'm on board. Vectrex homebrew community, please port Speed Freak to the Vectrex. I would love to play that again. Since that is not an option, since it's never been appearing on any home collections of any video games at all, I would definitely want to own Speed Freak. Now, before I move on to the next title, there's a couple more driving games on my list. And again, driving games are not really replicable in MAME or in a lot of home console versions. Again, without an EGCON steering or any kind of steering option, a lot of driving games just never really worked. And I was almost going to put on this list Ferrari F355 Challenge, but it's a fairly recent cool machine where you sit in it and you've got, I think, 3 screens that surround you, and it's a very visceral, cool, realistic driving thing. I almost put that on my list, but I've got PlayStation VR, and Drive Club in that is almost the exact same thing. And with that, you can look all around you and you're driving, and it's very arcade racer, but very, very cool. It also has the curse of being PlayStation 2 level graphics, so why put in Ferrari F355 Challenge when I can just play Drive Club instead? And there's a Ferrari in that. So, not including that one. But let's move away from driving games. Another machine I would love to play, and I actually did recently, last summer, Terminator 2. When I went to Playland, I actually tried it out. That was a game I played back in the 90s and I loved. And again, there's something about the guns physically being in your hands that it's not really replicable. I've got other home versions of T2, but they don't really work very well. I love the original machine, a lot of memories with it. I would love to own that one. And if you want to talk about cabinets that just look awesome, and that I also played back in the day, Environmental Discs of Tron. Now this is, first of all, a gorgeous looking cabinet. Very Tron, very glowy, very neon. It's huge, and it's also almost impossible to replicate that control scheme. Although I can play the original Tron arcade machine on Vol, using that trackball and the joystick and using my hand to push the button, that's fine, and you can almost do that with Discs of Tron. But the problem is, at a certain level in Discs of Tron, you also need to aim up and down. The spinner on the original arcade machine actually raised up and lowered down, so you had some direction in that way as well. So you're spinning in an up and down direction and moving the joystick and pulling the trigger. Almost impossible to replicate at home. So I would love to get an Environmental Discs of Tron because I played it back in the day and it looks amazing, and it's actually hard to recreate that with MAME. Now we're coming up to number 8 on the list, and we're starting to get a little ridiculous with some of these selections. I mean, T2 is okay, but like the Environmental Discs of Tron is a fairly large machine. It takes up a fair amount of space. It looks great, looks awesome. But I'm now going to get into really, really crazy cabinets. So for my 8th choice, I'm a little torn between, given that Star Wars Day just occurred, I want to get a Star Wars game in the list. And there's 2 that are kind of vying for that position. The first one is from 1997. Sega made the Star Wars arcade trilogy, which is really cool. I've played it. It's big, it's bulky, it's got a massive screen, and there is an emulator for it, but it's not perfect, and nobody's yet perfected that. I've dabbled with it a few times. It's in progress. I would almost take it off this list if somebody can emulate it properly, because it looks great. I mean, when you're doing the Hoth level and you're turning around and shooting all the stormtroopers on the ground, it's practically like Battlefront type experience. And for 1997, I mean, for a 20-year-old game, it looks great. And the speeder bike thing is really cool. So I would almost put Star Wars Arcade Trilogy from 1997 on this list. Or the other option is Star Wars Battle Pod, which I think it's called Battle Pod. I've seen it around a few places. This is me playing it when I was in Blackpool 2 years ago. It's this all-encompassing cabinet. Again, we're talking crazy, ridiculous cabinets here. And you are in this experience. Now, I've only played it once or twice because it's a pretty expensive financial thing. Like the price tag on each game was a little high for me. I'm like, oh, I can play this once or twice, just like in the old days. But to have that thing and to be shooting and to be like that invested and surrounded by the Star Wars experience, that would be very cool. I'm kind of hoping maybe they'll port that to VR or something someday, because that looks like one of those that I would almost get in there. So I'm torn between it and Star Wars Arcade Trilogy. I guess if I had to choose, I'll put Star Wars Battle Pod down, hoping that they're never going to release that in some other format so that it can be in my giant mansion with all these ridiculous machines in it. But I'm kind of secretly hoping, since I don't have that mansion and this is all just as a hypothetical, maybe they will release it on VR and then I can play it. My 9th selection is another driving game, and something I meant to mention with the Night Driver choice. I really wish they would make a little arcade machine of Night Driver, and kind of like they've got these little Qbert machines. I don't know why they've made a whole pile of these with a joystick and a button or two. I don't know why they haven't done one with a steering wheel, probably in the center, because a lot of these arcade experiences, like the one I'm about to mention, are really not doable unless you've got a steering wheel. And I'm just like, hey, you're making little custom cabinets of these machines. Why don't you put one with a steering wheel on it so I can get Night Driver? There was, Tomy made one in the 70s or 80s called, I think, Devil Driver. And I've looked at that since I have a couple of those Tomy machines, but it's a little noisy. I've been running into some bad luck with those machines, and it doesn't really work well. So I'm not going to put that one in there. But if I could send that out into the universe, hey, guys who are making these, Bridge Direct or whoever these guys are, please make ones that have steering wheels in them so we can play some of these driving games. Like the next one on my list, although I don't think this would work on a little thing like that. In the 90s, there was this very cool, very big machine called Lucky and Wild. And I've seen it once, never driven it, never played it, but it looks amazing. It's a driving game, kind of Starsky and Hutch. It's you and your buddy in a car, one of you drives, and the other one shoots the bad guys with the gun. There's no way to recreate that. Apparently, the Starsky and Hutch game that came out for the original Xbox had maybe that functionality in it, because there is a light gun that exists for the original Xbox, and you could shoot stuff on the screen in Starsky and Hutch, and maybe the other person could drive. I don't know. I've never really wrapped my head around it. It doesn't look all that great, and I haven't heard good things, so I thought, you know what, I'm not going to bother with that one. Maybe it's in my What's in the Xbox series someday. But in the meantime, if I could get a Lucky and Wild cabinet where I could actually be driving and I think maybe use the gun with my other hand, I think I'd go crazy trying to concentrate on both items. That would be one of the machines definitely I would like to own. It's huge, but man, that thing is awesome looking. But the final choice is one that is ridiculous, and I can kind of play it already, and I'm going to do it on my channel one day, but since we're talking hypothetical, what if you could own any 10 cabinets, which ones would they be? I'm going to request Galaxian 3, which you're thinking to yourself, this is like an airplane cockpit or something. That's kind of what it looks like. It's this huge machine that 2 people, actually I think up to 4 people can sit inside of with a little controller thing in front of your chair. You sit in a chair in this machine, and a giant screen is in front of you, and you're shooting waves of bad guys. And it's essentially a full motion video thing, a little bit like when I did Starblade Alpha for the PlayStation 1. It's a little bit like that, but it's like more intense waves of bad guys, and there's like 4 of you with these like laser cannons physically in front of your chair, and you're shooting stuff, and it's just pandemonium on screen. So that would be another one. I actually have Galaxian 3 for the PlayStation 1. This is the Japanese import. I can play it on my PlayStation 1, and using the mouse, it's doable. I mean, it's kind of a compromised experience, but it is that footage. It is the scene that you're flying around in as your spaceship, and you are shooting those bad guys. It's not balanced for one person. I mean, I can only get so far in this thing before I die. It's a compromise. And honestly, we are again talking hypothetical what-ifs. So sure, I want a Galaxian 3 giant machine cabinet thing taking up one whole corner wing of this hypothetical mansion that I'm living in, because, yeah, why not? I've got these other 9 ridiculous machines. This would be number 10. Galaxian 3. Alright, well there we go. Those are my 10 machines I would own. Again, I can play a lot of my favorites through Vol or through some other format, and I wanted to go with this answer in a different direction. So those are my selections. Maybe others are going to also chime in. I did see Novabug was kind of interested when he saw Lactobacillus' post, but haven't seen any reply himself. Maybe I'm too late. This is all from about a month ago anyway. But I thought I'd throw my answers out there and see if anybody else wants to chime in too. All right, until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.